Divisional round mailbag. We've got coach news as well. The Browns firing their offensive coaching staff. And are we one step closer to Bill Belichick and the Atlanta Falcons? Draft QBs, draft misses, late round draft, tons of questions. Cowboys need a change up. All that and more coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there. Make sure you are subscribed up. Hit the notification bell, hit the thumbs up on YouTube, and you can find us everywhere you find your podcast. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jace case, providing a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com and use code LOCKEDON to get $20 off your order. That is jacemedical.com for $20 off your order. Okay, Matt, we are going to start with a little bit of news before we get into the questions, and a little bit of a surprising and a little bit of a late happening. I mean, we're still the week after a playoff loss, but usually these things happen very quickly. And so sounds like some internal discussions, and the Browns are going to make a change up, and it's going to be on the offensive side of the ball, firing, according to Josina Anderson here on Wednesday morning, firing their entire offensive staff, essentially. Offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt, running backs coach Stump Mitchell, tight ends coach TC McCartney, and I assume everybody on down from there is going to be at least at best interviewing for their jobs. Mm-hmm. And I imagine a new offensive coordinator is going to want to bring in his own people. So interesting there that the Browns are. You can't change quarterbacks really at this point if you're the Browns. So what can you do to help the offense? I guess you got to go to the offensive coordinator because the head coach isn't firing himself.
Yeah, one name I didn't see, and I'd be shocked, is Bill Callahan. He's considered one of the best offensive line coaches in a really long time. And frankly, I'd give him any amount of money he wanted to just be my own line coach. But I don't know about this whole move. I mean, I'm not in the building, so maybe there's strife or whatever, or they don't think or they're not as competent as everyone wants. But it wasn't like it was a bad offense this year. They lost Nick Chubb in week 2, who was going to be the foundation of the whole offense. They've gone through like 5 offensive tackles and 4 quarterbacks. I mean, I can't stress that enough. I mean, they had 4 starting quarterbacks, 5 maybe even seen the field. But my first thoughts when I heard this was, is it something about Watson? You know, do they just feel like they're not developing or catering to Watson well enough? I mean, he's going to be the starter, and Flacco look better. Is it, boy, we can't fire Watson, so we're going to fire you guys. You know what I mean?
I can't imagine they're going to stray too far from, a scheme that the head coach came from that got him hired in the first place. So is it scheme related? Are they going to change the scheme completely and go different direction, different verbiage and everything? So that's a fascinating one. And rarely, we were talking about coach of the year coming out of right.
He still might win it.
Job they did, and he might win it, and you fire your staff. That would be bizarre. I can't remember a time that has ever happened.
True. However, I mean, and I lived this, in my life to the T. They fire a lot of coaches there. You don't last very long in the Browns, front office or coaching staff. They have quite the history.
We'll put a pin in that idea because I had a similar thought when it came to the Dallas Cowboys. And what's okay. I don't remember who said it, but what's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And I think owners are wired in a certain way where they're going to see a problem and make a change to fix that problem or change that, that thing. And I think that's what we're seeing, where it's like, okay, you look at everything. Well, we can't change quarterback. We're not changing the head coaches. The defensive side of the ball Definitely going to be untouched. So what do? Offensive coordinator. It's the only logical next step to make a big change on the offensive side of the ball.
Or you just run it back
or stay healthy.
Right.
New training staff, maybe. I don't know. So Bill Belichick interviewed with the Falcons on Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
And we were sitting here on Wednesday, and Jeremy Fowler of ESPN reports that Falcons defensive coordinator Ryan Nielsen, who was originally blocked from interviewing for Jacksonville's coordinator job, is now able to speak with teams. Per source, multiple clubs want to speak with him, including the Jaguars. Do you find it curious that less than 24 hours after meeting with Bill Belichick, that now the holdover staff is allowed to leave from the Atlanta Falcons, Matt?
I think it's quite the omen. I think it's quite the inkling that we might be getting news in the next 24 hours. Bill's not an easy guy to say. So if you're an owner and you have a coaching vacancy, it's a heck of a lot easier to get a deal done, the contract, the write-up, the agreement with Gannon in Arizona a year ago. I mean, like a coordinator that's getting his first gig. When it's a Mount Rushmore coach, he's going to fine-tune the verbiage, the dollars, the responsibilities. So they may have a handshake agreement in place already. We just need to cross all the T's and all that type of thing. And frankly, I've kind of thought he's going to end up in Atlanta now for the last month or so. So I don't have any, I don't know the scoop. I'm not, Adam Schefter, but I bet that happens.
Just kind of putting things together here with that one. And it seems like a good match. I think it's a great hire for the Atlanta Falcons. They're pretty close. You figure out quarterback. You do have a top 10 pick to go, whatever direction you want, up, down, pick a player there, pick a quarterback, pick a non-quarterback, pick a guard. This is Bill Belichick after all. In a place where you are in a spot where you should give Bill all the power he wants. And of course, if you hire Bill Belichick, who's going to oversee the defense, he's going to bring in his own guys. So the dots we're connecting here are becoming they're pretty large dots. I would say that, even though we haven't heard reports officially that Belichick is going to the Falcons.
Yeah. No, you mentioned that before going on the air that I didn't even catch that. The coaches were granted permission. That's a great catch, and it's the writing's kind of on the wall, I would imagine.
A question here from Izaz, and he's a frequent tweeter into the program. He has this question of us at Williamson NFL, at BD Peacock. Those are the ats to hit us at. If you ever want to get involved in a mailbag on Twitter, you can drop a question in the YouTube comments as well. He says, if you two are executives with the Dallas Cowboys, would you rather extend Dak and CD and trade Micah Parsons for a boatload of picks? They can do all three. Then you sacrifice a lot more. What do you think there with the plan from Izaz for the Dallas Cowboys? You keep the offense intact and you utilize your best trade chip instead of paying Micah Parsons what he's going to cost. Then you utilize all those picks to bolster the rest of the roster. What do you think?
It's a great conversation, and I haven't studied it. I mean, I'm sure you could keep all three and manipulate the books and move things around, and salary cap is, a myth and that type of thing. But if you have to pick, I just know I'm not moving on from Parsons. I mean,
that's backwards opposite of what I would do. Yeah. And I had a feeling we'd be in lockstep, and we didn't, talk about this beforehand because I was interested to hear what you had to say. First of all, you keep Parsons, period, done, pay him.
Period, no matter what. Highest paid defensive player in the league, whatever,
And then next, I would pay CD and go shopping for a quarterback if that's what I needed to do, and I could only keep 2 or 3. I think that's the order. Parsons, CD, then Dak. And it kind of goes back to what we just talked about with the Browns, is how many times do you finish the season the same way before you change something? And maybe it's head coach, maybe it's offensive coordinator, which they've already done the OC thing. So there's no more OC stuff. It's McCarthy or Dak at this point to me.
Yeah, this is a much longer conversation, and maybe one once the playoffs ends. But we could do a whole Dak Prescott podcast, to be honest with you, because
I think we should. Yeah,
it'd be fine with me too. And I haven't read it yet, but just yesterday, ESPN Analytics put out their most valuable players of 2023 regular season, and Dak was number 1. Now, I don't think he's the most valuable player in the league, but he was in MVP conversation at one point. I think he gets way too much blame for this guy's a choker, this guy's a playoff loser. I think he's starting to get lumped in, and I'm not trying to, offend these guys, but the Kirk Cousins, Tua's, not a locomotive for the organization. He's kind of along for the ride, but a little bit better than that. I think he's better than those guys. I mean, the real football nerds, the real tape nerds think he's like a Peyton Manning like processor at the line of scrimmage, and mentally he never gets credit for that stuff. He's not going to be Josh Allen. He's not going to be Mahomes, but every year we talk about Mike Sando's QB tiers. I think he's a tier 2 guy. And my rules are, if you're a tier 1 or tier 2 guy, we're rolling together, man.
Okay, more on this because this is fascinating.
This is a whole conversation.
Yeah, a little bit more on this, and I think we do need to do some, season ending, how to fix blank teams, and we've done that in the past after teams are eliminated. Usually, we wait until the divisional round just because there's so many teams, you can't fit them all into a week. But the Dallas Cowboys are a really good one, and where they're at right now. So, one more note on the Dallas Cowboys, where they're at, if they should clean house, if not. I want to talk about some draft questions we have in the hopper as well. Should you draft and sit quarterbacks, play them right away? And how the heck did everyone miss on late round guys like Puka Nacua? Coming up. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is sponsored by BetterHelp Online Therapy. And sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest, big or small. Certain things can really start to get to you. It starts small and it becomes big, snags at it, just stays there. It's so important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today, let's think about some things that bother you, that might have started small, that might end big, that might have started big and ended, and they're still huge for you, whether it's personal life, marriage, whether it's job related. Matt, you and I talked about some podcast stuff before we got going. And,
a little frustrating.
And so some frustrations, and you can't let that nag at you. And it can be your favorite sports team. It could be your favorite football team. I know there's some fans that you talk to every day about the Pittsburgh Steelers, Matt, that might need to go to therapy about it. And it sounds trivial.
I have to interrupt you. I apologize because I just did my first Locked On Dynasty with Kate and Marcus, and we had this exact same conversation with this exact same read. And Marcus, coincidentally, is stressing a whole lot about the Cowboys and Dak Prescott that we were just talking about. There you go.
You might need to
therapy
about it. And it's obviously some other very more important things in your life. And therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams, right? So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Today's episode of P&W is also brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. It is daily fantasy made easy at PrizePicks. How easy? All you do is you pick 2 to 6 players, and you're playing against the numbers. You are playing against those projections at PrizePicks. Tons of projections on tons of sports, including those NFL playoff games. You pick more or less than the stat projections on 2 to 6 players and watch the winnings roll in. You can turn $10 into $250. We're talking winning up to 25 times your money if you hit all 6 player more than, less than on their stat projections. You can even do combo projections between NFL and NBA games. For example, it's a combo with LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at 10.5 combo of 3 points made plus receptions. And all you got to do is go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use promo code lockedonnfl for a first deposit match up to $100. Download the app or go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy. Just to finish up this smaller version of the Dallas Cowboys conversation, and we're going to have to do an entire podcast on the Dallas Cowboys and what needs to be fixed there, if anything needs to be fixed there with the Dallas Cowboys. But it's a great point you brought up about Dak Prescott. And if you just kind of combine some of the things we've been talking about on today's show, and the Dallas Cowboys, let's say they're like, all right, well, it's been kind of the same result. We're going to move on from Dak Prescott. Don't you think the Atlanta Falcons would say, can I please get a Dak Prescott at quarterback for my football team and go dominate this division, right? And so you think when you have it and you have a second tier quarterback, you're like, man, I wish we had a tier one quarterback. And in my head right now, I'm envisioning, and this is aging me as far as video games go out there, but the old heads would remember playing Donkey Kong in the arcade, right? And you play Donkey Kong and you got the little guy and he's climbing up the ladders, right? You got Dak Prescott and he gets up to the rung just before the top tier and he's going to save Donkey Kong at the top. And he's climbing up the ladder and he gets hit with the barrel and falls back down. That's kind of like what's going on with Dak Prescott. He's not quite
really
getting to the top, but he's very close, right? Meanwhile, half the teams in the league can't get off the bottom rung and you can't climb one ladder up. So
right.
It's really a fascinating conversation because it's a have and have not. And when you have a pretty good quarterback, you still want more. And when you don't have a good quarterback at all, you realize how good a team like the Dallas Cowboys has it.
So I referenced that ESPN article that came out yesterday, and their logic for putting him number one as the most valuable guy in the whole league this year was he was second in QBR, second in expected points added, first in points above average. He led the league in completion percentage over expectation, despite having the league's third highest receiver drop rate. So his completion percentage was great, even though his guys are dropping balls left and right. And I couldn't help myself. You mentioned the Falcons. How good would the Falcons or Steelers be with Dak Prescott for 18 games this year? Like 13-4, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. No doubt. And so that's the question was about the three players. But if I'm Jerry Jones and I put my Jerry Jones hat on, I'm going to McCarthy before I even mess with any of those players. So
absolutely. And I'm probably doing everything possible to keep all three. And the more I think it through, I'm not trading Dak for the 8th pick overall to Atlanta and drafting Penix in hopes it goes better, because it probably won't.
Right. It would have to be a much bigger thing where you're like, okay, well, let's go. Let's sign. And you're still going to be paying a lot of money if you sign Kirk Cousins, but you would go, okay, let's go here and then see if we can hit on another Dak late round quarterback or, second, third round quarterback and use that pick we just got for Dak to help out our football team, to help out our quarterback. And we wouldn't drop much at quarterback. We go to the, from the middle or the top of the tier 2 to the bottom of tier 2 or something like that. So that would maybe be the thought, or maybe they're like, okay, we're going to use our pick and the pick we get for Dak, and we're going up in the top 3 to get a quarterback. We're really shaking this thing up. I could see that because you get cheaper at the same time and you hope you get a star. But I'd probably go to Mike McCarthy and make that change before I mess with any of the rest of it.
So I need to ask you this. We kind of touched on it, so I think I know your answer. But hypothetically, if it was Dallas that made the draft day trade with Carolina last year, and they were owned the first overall pick in this draft, I think then you really entertain offers for Dak then, just for finances. You get $50 million off the books or whatever, and you get
no doubt.
8 years younger, 10 years younger,
I feel the same way about the Bears too. And
me too.
Dak's had a ton of success, whereas, Justin Fields has had very little success in the NFL. And we did get some Bears fans that came at us sideways and they thought we didn't give Justin Fields enough credit. And it's just 100% Luke Getsy in the offense there. But, we've already seen multiple coaches and we, haven't seen enough from Justin Fields. So it's different reason, but it's the same result. If I had any team that doesn't have a tier 1 quarterback, I'm taking the pick at 1 and drafting that quarterback. And, especially if I can get something for my current quarterback and get a lot cheaper, it's an easy decision for me.
And this is hindsight, but I wouldn't have done it as necessarily last year because I undervalued Stroud, although he was my number 1 quarterback, and I wanted nothing to do with Bryce Young, where this year it looks better,
Yep. Speaking of quarterbacks, Dave has a question. Will Jordan Love be an argument for teams to draft and sit quarterbacks to learn behind a starter for a year or two, or will teams not have the patience for that? Too much short-term pressure on coaches and GMs to potentially do that. What's funny is Aaron Rodgers before him was the example that everyone used. And it's like, oh, well, we're not in that era anymore. And quarterbacks are more prepared. And the finances of the league now has changed to where you can't sit a guy for 3 years because then you have to make a decision in 5th-year options and pay a guy before you know. And we've seen that with Daniel Jones. So that's kind of been the argument against sitting quarterbacks. And we don't nearly see as much sitting as we used to. It used to be that rookies just didn't play. Almost didn't.
I mean, that's when I started doing this professionally. I remember Bengals fans losing their mind. We still are trotting out John Kitna, even though we used the first overall pick on Carson Palmer. And that was just the norm back then, though. I mean, and frankly, I think it's better for the player. Every player is different, of course. But I do think that, back to this question, there's immense value in that. Like, maybe the Rams should draft one right now with no intention of him ever seeing the field next year. But Stafford's not going to play forever. Pat Mahomes did this, by the way, folks. I mean, he only played the week 18 or 17 game because it didn't matter. He didn't play a snap when Alex Smith was there, and it sure treated him well. Would his career be as glorious if he got thrown in week 1? And that was a playoff team that drafted him. So the answer to the question is both. I mean, if you're a human being with a family and I have to win this year, I can't draft a quarterback when I have Dak. Dak's a great example, sitting there in his prime. I can't do that because I'm going to get fired. I have to draft a guard. I have to draft a tight end, whatever. But if you really do have job security, if it's the Steeler model or, the Packer model where they don't just shuffle through people left and right, I always think you should take one. You know what I mean?
And it's funny because when we bring it back to the Bears again, I think if you're Eberflus, you have to succeed the fastest, which is getting the most talent around the guy that you've already tried to develop. And because it's so rare to have that CJ Stroud rookie season from a guy. And so I can definitely see them going in that direction, because you can't do another draft a quarterback, fire the head coach again, because it's just, what are you doing if you're that organization, and they still might do that. But with Jordan Love, he sat because he had a Hall of Famer in front of him. So who's in front of you is a big question. Is there a good mentor? Patrick Mahomes had Alex Smith. That's a nice mentor in a playoff caliber team. If you're a bad team and you have a complete scrub of a backup guy anyway, like, why would you trot that guy out there? And the more you played in college, it's sort of counterintuitive too. We saw this with Trey Lance and the 49ers. Trey Lance needed to play, but they sat him. That was the plan. They had Jimmy Garoppolo and they had a playoff team. And then Trey Lance had got one ankle injury, and there you go. End of opportunity. It's over. And he needed, the thing he needed the most was reps, and he needed to be able to play. But Jordan Love played a lot, so it actually helps a quarterback that played a lot to sit, because they don't need the reps as much as they need to learn the offense that they're going to be in. But if a guy didn't play a lot in college, he needs to play. And does he get ruined by playing because he needs the reps? So it all comes back to draft a guy who's already played a lot of college football, and it'll probably make all the decisions a lot easier. Yeah,
it's a great point. And, Favre wasn't considered this wonderful mentor for Rodgers. Rodgers wasn't happy they drafted Love.
Right.
Montana wasn't happy at all when Steve Young showed up. But those guys are all-time greats. You can't tell me Young, Love, Rodgers didn't absorb so much from their guy ahead of them, even if they're not having picnics together after practice. They don't have to be buddies, but if I'm in that room with them in the practice field with them, I'm getting better. I mean, Garoppolo with Brady. I mean, just come on. If I can sit in the quarterback room with Tom Brady.
Stability. And then you sit there and you have the same system and mostly the same coaching staffs in all those situations, and you learn and you're more ready to go when it is time to play.
Yeah, I mean, like Seattle should draft a quarterback. Maybe Detroit should draft a quarterback. They kind of did with Hooker, at least. So they kind of thought this through. I get Kansas City doesn't, but
I don't know if Hooker was the guy that this going to end up applying to, because I think Goff's better. And by the time Goff's done, I realize Hooker's not the replacement anyway.
Sure.
But yeah, it's, it's a better situation there for sure.
Yeah. But like if Seattle or the Rams were to use a first round pick on a quarterback, I'd be like, good move. Even if he doesn't play a snap this year.
But it's so hard. You can sit Bryce Young. You just drafted him number 1 overall, and there's nobody better anyway. So it just you kind of screwed either way there.
I don't think you sit him just to sit him, but it's more applies to good teams.
Yes. And so how about this? Have a good team first, and then plug a quarterback.
There you go.
Right. Why do people miss on the late round stars that come out of nowhere like Puka? Some of the draft questions as well coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Jace Medical and the Jace Case. And I know we come to sports to escape from some of the crazy realities of real life, but let's just talk for a minute about preparing for real life. And according to the FDA, pharmacies are running out of antibiotics like amoxicillin. And so the Jace Case is a pack of 5 different antibiotics to treat a long list of bacterial illnesses, UTIs, skin infections, respiratory infections, 50 plus ailments that these medications can help with. So if you have specific needs, you can utilize those with your Jace case as well. And you're protected for if you're traveling with your family and you have specific needs and you don't want to be caught without cell phone service and you're not going to have access to medication, supply chain issues, as mentioned with the amoxicillin there, or natural disasters. We've been through pandemics, right? So visit jacemedical.com and complete your physician visit. It's reviewed by a board certified physician. Your medications will be dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost, and you'll know you will be prepared. So go to jacemedical.com and utilize our code locked on to get $20 off your Jace case. Again, go to jacemedical.com, code locked on for $20 off your order. Jace Medical, JASE medical.com. How did everyone miss on Tua, Matt? We've
Puka.
got, let's go to the question, the official question here, if I can even find it anymore. Got a ton of great questions here. This is from Sir Madramissimo. He says, curious from Matt, how scouts do reviews post-draft and sit and wonder how the hell did we miss on a player so badly, Puka, for example, and how to avoid such misses in the future.
Well, I think any good scout goes back on their evaluations and be like, man, do I have a tendency of valuing athleticism over production too much amongst my tight ends? Or do I not give small school guys enough credit? Or am I too easy on them? Or you're crazy if you don't scout the scout. And frankly, GM should do that. They should scout their scouting staff and be like, he's got a hole in his game here. He's got a hole in his game here.
Self-scouting is so important. And I think there's a lot of ego that it's like, well, I didn't screw this up. Can I tell a quick story here? So please. I did a scouting school, and I'm not going to name any names, but I did a scouting school, and there's a guy who was a high-ranking, GM personnel guy for a long time in the NFL that was running this scouting school. Mm-hmm. And it was really cool. I learned a lot of stuff, and there's a few different people that worked in the league that were helping out with this, and this long course on scouting, and I learned a lot, and it was super fun. But one of the guys, and the main guy that was kind of in charge of it, I asked him a question one time. We had sort of a Q&A thing, and we're talking, and I was like, hey, well, what was your biggest miss in your draft evaluations, and what did you learn from it? And he said, he's like, oh, I've never missed on an evaluation. And, I was kind of chuckled, and it was like, okay. And, waiting for the real answer. That was his real answer.
Coaches just screwed it up.
Worked in the league for 20 years. Never missed ever. Never screwed anything up. And so I think you
coaches messed it all up.
Yeah.
And that's both true. I mean, if I'm a coach that gets handed a bad player and I need to turn him into my starting running back and he can't read or write or whatever, it's not going to work.
It's hard to miss when you say, here's my evaluation. He's 6'4", 250 and led his conference in tackles. Great evaluation.
So we all miss, and frankly, it goes without saying, you're drafting young men. It was even more so in recruiting. I mean, some of these guys aren't even done with puberty. Their bodies are changing. Their outlook on life is changing. Their situation, their finances is changing. The city they live in is changing. So there's a lot of room for error. No one's going to hit them all. And frankly, these players have power to get better or to put it in neutral and get worse. But real quick on Puka, I just heard this the other day because he's been in the news a lot, that his coach at BYU used to be on staff at, Eastern Washington, wherever Cooper Kupp went, so Cooper Kupp calls his old buddy up, McVay calls his old buddy up and says, boy, he reminds me of Kupp, blah, 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 blah. And with all respect to Puka, who's tremendous and a great story, no way do I believe that he sets rookie records if, hypothetically, the Panthers draft him in the third round, throw him in the rookie, instead of Mingo, they took, Nacua, threw him right in the mix. We would be having this conversation about him.
If you put Mingo in LA and you put Puka in Carolina, it wouldn't be exact replications of their opposite seasons, but Mingo would have looked a lot better and Puka would have looked a lot worse.
Yes. And to take it a step further, McVay isn't looking for the 4-2 guy. He wants a big blocking powerful after the catch cup replacement type. You know, not everyone wants that style receiver.
Right. And so when you're scouting a player like that, and look, okay, go look for the next Puka. You're going to have you're going to have 10 years of misses, and then you're going to find a guy, right? Because it's not a prototype that hits a lot, which is why he went where they went. But you can't. It's hard. The hardest thing to scout is the brain, and when you watch Puka in the Mountain West, or what, Mountain West Conference, is that where BYU's playing?
I should know, but there's so much has changed so much in the alignments. I don't know.
But Puka, you see him, and you're like, okay, well, he's barely getting open now. Is he going to get open against NFL guys, right? And so that's kind of the thought. And then you realize, well, what he did to win still wins in the NFL. And I this is where I've missed a lot in my draft evaluations too. And this is very true for wide receivers. It's very true for like pass rushers, and true for positions like running back. It is real easy to out athlete people and destroy your competition, especially in the high school level, and then still in the college game. And if you are a running back, you get to the NFL, you're just not going to run around guys anymore. So you better be efficient and have vision and know where the hole is and hit it quick and be able to run through arm tackles, right? And you better be, if you're a wide receiver, better be able to win dirty, win through contact, be tough, be able to take hits, be a technician with your routes, make it so your wide receiver, your quarterback, and your offensive coach can trust you. And that's more important than, how fast your long speed is. Can you get out of a break? And with pass rushers, right, you're not going to just run around offensive tackles all day and collect sacks like you might be able to do because you're a better athlete in college. You got to be able to win with technique. You've got to be able to beat a guy who gets his hands on you and have counter moves. And so that's why it takes positions like pass rusher and tight end a while, because they have to learn a lot of nuance and they have to learn a lot of technique. And, tight ends is a position where the big time athletes that are drafted early don't always win out, because there's a mentality that has to be involved. You have to be able to run and block and do all the things I talked about at wide receiver, and your quarterbacks have to be able to trust you. So add that to your evaluations, and it makes your evaluations a lot more difficult. But I think that's why you see the guys who are less athletic, that don't put on shows at the time at the combine, hit in later rounds, because they have the mindset that they are going to beat you in any way they can. They work at it, and you can trust that player is going to do everything they can to win each rep.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. There's tons of examples, but one that just came to mind while you were talking was Vic Beasley. I mean, he comes out of Clemson, explodes off the snap, great combine guy, but he's a one-trick pony. He was just a speed rusher to the outside. He had no speed to power. He couldn't go through guys. He didn't have counters. And soon everyone in the league knew it and was like, I'm just going to push him up the field. And off you go.
And you see it all the time with the guys who run 4.3s at wide receiver. And Coleman from Baylor, remember? And,
Corey Coleman.
You see that all the time.
2 routes or something. Right.
And so what's funny is combine athleticism translates better to the big guys like offensive linemen than it does
even like guards and centers. I want them to have good shuttles. You don't think that, right?
Wide receivers, because you have to be able to win dirty. So when you're watching that college tape, find the guys who can win dirty at especially those positions where you think athleticism is king, and that's where you find your nuggets, I think.
That's great.
All right. Thanks for all the questions. Apologies to the ones we did not get to. Of course, Matt and I will be back tomorrow. We've got a special guest tomorrow, Aaron Schatz. He is the guru of DVOA. You probably hear a lot about DVOA, value over average stats. What does it mean? What is it? And how do these divisional teams stack up in DVOA?
The godfather of analytics.
There we go. On tomorrow's episode. And of course, on Friday, we'll make picks for all the divisional round games. Talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.